And with us in studio, Eliud, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm okay.
Thank you first for honoring us with your presence. This guy, well, it's just a matter of like 10 years before he's officially senior counsel. He's a great man of God.
Amen.
He's also a beloved husband to one.
To one.
Just one.
One.
And has always been just one. He's a faithful man. This was a good friend of mine. Eliud, good morning and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Tell us about yourself. Who are you in case someone is tuning in and they've never heard of you? Like, I would be very shocked if someone has not heard of you before.
Imagine.
That's a very hard question to answer. But basically, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and a Christ follower, and a leader, someone who likes criticizing this government.
How long have you been practicing?
I've been practicing now for almost 7 years.
Almost 7 years?
Yes.
So admitted in 2016, 17?
2017.
2017.
Yeah.
How has practice been so far?
Amazing. It's a nice feeling to actually help people, to give solutions to issues, and to even see justice prevail in most circumstances. Yeah.
All right, let's just get this ball rolling about justice prevailing. Now, Hobbs is a wanted man.
Wololo.
Hobbs ameshikwa one time too many for reasons best known to him.
Mostly
Mara, it's loitering at night.
drunk and
But
disorderly.
then what he's charged with is
Imagine.
being drunk and disorderly. So what we're going to do today, Eliud, is we're just going to give you a couple of scenarios. Maybe you can guide us through, as an advocate, what to do. So Hobbs is working in Ngong Town. It's 11 p.m. It's a Tuesday night like tonight. He's had a great show. He's gone and met some of his friends. They've had dinner later in the evening. And he went home a bit late. Akapanda 111 compliant. Kashuka pale stage. Cops pounced on him. And that's him, where is your ID? Hajibeba ID. Because he never carries anything apart from mandazis.
Oh Lord.
That's
Mandazis.
true.
It's my phone and charger alone. Nothing else.
Because he knows always going to be late. And then he's taken in and he's charged. What does one do once the minute you've been arrested? Do you say like in the movies, let me call my lawyer? What do you do first?
Well, once you're arrested, number one, we have a good constitution, 2010, that gives the right of the arrested persons. So you have a right, even when you're arrested, first, to be informed of the crime you have committed. Secondly, to actually a right to be represented, to actually seek for representation of an advocate. Number three, you should be presented in court as soon as possible or within 24 hours if it's on a weekday, or within on the first day of the week
Of the new week,
if arrested
over
on
the
a Friday.
weekend. Yes.
Or weekend.
Uh-huh.
And so those are some of the rights you have. Number four, you have a right to bail. That actually you should be able to exchange your freedom for cash.
For cash.
Yes, until the day you appear in court, just to make sure that you don't disappear.
One of the things that I know factors in, you have the right to be told what you're being charged with or arrested for, but in a language you understand. So for me, I feel like if they arrest me first in Swahili and everything, where does that come in? Because I'm just like cops. I'm like, okay, tell me in English. Tell me what I've been charged with. Where does that play? Eliud, do you have now to tell them and get a translator for me, or what happens?
No, you have to be informed in whichever form. You need to understand whatever crime you have been charged with or you've been arrested for. So if, for example, you are not even Kenyan, like Hobbs, who I believe comes from near Uganda, somewhere there, they have to get an interpreter who needs to inform him. For example, if you are deaf or blind,
Yes.
they need to get someone who can communicate to you that you have been arrested and the reason why you've been arrested. So that's part of your rights.
Speaking of which, Eliud, have you been arrested before?
I have been arrested
really?
before. Yeah, it
What
was
for?
actually fun.
Serious?
I was in law school and I wanted to find out, how you feel like you're a lawyer, you understand your rights.
Oh man, our days of
etc.
folly.
So you are throwing a stone in a glass.
No, I was not throwing anything. It was actually that kind of a scenario. I was
really?
thrown into a truck.
And
I was like, Nini, let's go. Let's see what's happening at the cell. I'm going to get myself out. And so I didn't know how quickly and how fast these guys move. And the next thing, we were locked up in a room and I slept in.
what?
Yeah.
Lawyer.
How long were you there?
How long? A night. It was quite interesting.
Which station is this?
This was Ngong Police Station.
The famous
Oh my
Ngong.
goodness me. Oh my goodness me.
You
Karawa
see?
Ngong.
You see? Ngong by there.
So how did you get bailed out?
No, the following morning, they were releasing guys. So you just...
So was it a weekday?
It was a it was actually a weekday. It was on a Friday evening,
Mhm.
and I think there was an operation whereby we didn't like people who are loitering around at night. So I seem to have just alighted from a matatu, and the next thing, the lorry was parked next to the matatu.
Mariamu.
Yes. And
Ukishuka unaingia hapa.
Ehe.
yes, and I was there trying to show them my Kenya School of Law ID, saying, hey, you know, I'm a lawyer. And then the cop told me, Gojea kidogo, we'll come and talk to you later. And then another cop just came in and didn't want to listen to anyone.
Yeah.
So you actually maybe need to be physically fit
Yeah.
to actually fight your way out of that place.
Can you sue the police for wrongful arrest?
You can't sue the police.
Can you sue them successfully?
Yes, there's a body called IPOA that investigates on their conduct. And they have, that's why the police will follow the procedure under the law. That one, they understand they can use force if you refuse or you fail to actually accept to be arrested. So they can actually use minimum force.
Yeah.
Or reasonable force to actually arrest you. And so from there, if they don't or maybe exceed the force, you can proceed ahead and go to and actually file a case against the police. Yes, or a complaint against the cop at the IPOA.
Let me paint a different scenario for you, Eliud. Perhaps Hobbs has been misbehaving and got someone pregnant and they didn't get married. Right?
Wololo.
Just per chance. Right? And Hobbs is living a good life.
The best.
He's living a good life. He's a radio morning presenter.
Kwisha.
He's a renowned DJ. He's also doing gigs left, right, and center.
Killer weekend.
Getting home at odd hours of the night.
Wow.
After working. Right? But he's not supporting his children. What do I do with Hobbs if you're advising his baby mama?
The baby mama needs to come to me as an advocate, and we are going to first send Hobbs a demand letter asking him to pay up child support, and we are going to calculate how much the child needs to grow up, for example. So the daily expenses, school, because under the Children's Act, now we have a new act 2022.
Yes.
That allows that a child has a right also to shelter, food, clothing, and education. And so these rights will only focus on this child, not on the baby mama, where she lives and the etc. and the lifestyle that she wants. We are going to focus on these needs. Send that demand letter. If Hobbs does not come to the table to actually have this conversation with us, we have a children's court. We have quite a number of children's courts, depending with where one lives. And we are going to file a case at the children's court, and we are going to have things we call prayers, asking the court to compel
Hobbs.
VDJ Hobbs to pay monthly child support of Kenya shillings XYZ, and that will actually happen. And if Hobbs does not comply with that order that the court is going to grant, then VDJ Hobbs might be put in for in a civil jail for actually failing to comply with that court order.
Now, how do they calculate that? Because I've been seeing very many baby mamas who go to court and ask for astronomical figures.
School 1 million.
Na wewe kila kitu kiaka pamoja, hata madeni haifiki half a million. Haifiki. How do you calculate that, Eliud, without being exploitative?
We're going to ask ourselves, or rather the court normally asks itself, or would demand that if Hobbs should be bright enough to get a lawyer who comes in and actually fights for him. And we are going to request that Hobbs is allowed to file in a document known as affidavit of means, which is basically a payslip showing what income, the sources of income, with the match that Hobbs is able to provide for. And the lady also is going to be requested to provide for the same. And also the court sends a third party who is a children's court officer, who are found at various districts, to go to their homes and see, does Hobbs live in a 3-bedroom house, 5-bedroom house
with a big TV screen?
How many house helps and workers? Same for the lady. And then they're going to file an independent report in court, which the magistrate or the judge is going to rely upon and see the kind of, to have the picture of the kind of lifestyle that Hobbs and the lady have. But also, the court also says that, or rather the law is that you cannot provide more than what you have to maintain the same standard of life for the child as the child was exposed to. So suppose Hobbs was actually living with the baby mama and they were exposed to the 1 million Kenya shillings kind of school.
Yes.
Then once they part ways, Hobbs has to maintain that standard.
Wow.
Yes.
I have a question though.
Go ahead.
What about if I want custody of the child? If I am sure my baby mama can't maintain my child, how do I get to a point where I'm getting the child from her to myself in a lawful manner without me kidnapping the child?
And there are instances where the male parent is the primary custodian of the child.
Yeah.
So as it stands, there's what we call a child of tender age, who is a child of the age of 10 and below. And the custody is first granted to the mother, unless there are other factors that may be considered by the court, which might be either if your moral standing as a mother or as a father actually are going to affect the child, if you have a terminal disease, if you there are these extreme factors that the court is going to look at, and from that, if you're able to make a case for the baby mama and say that probably she doesn't even sleep at home. She's never at home. She's never able to provide for this child.
Yeah.
And I'm in a position to actually provide. And this is what the court calls most of the time, or rather the law calls it the best interest of the child. What would be the best thing to do for this child to make sure that this child has a very good and healthy life? So if you're able to prove that the best interest of the child would be when they are living with you as a father, then the court is going to grant that. But you might have a very hard case to prove that if the gender of a child, for example, is a female. So if it's a girl child, it's a girl, and you want to have a full custody of a child, and you're a man, because we are going to look at the best interest of a child would be to actually be with the mom. Yeah,
very true.
So what even the case of unfortunately, let's say Hobbs decides to go and get married to this same girl that he was in love with, and then the marriage is not working, and they need to go separate ways. How do they split property, and do prenups play a role in this country now?
Exactly. Because before we got married, I had a very nice car,
And you were balling.
and I was balling.
Did you sign a prenup?
No. And when we got married, I bought this lady a nice car, better than mine.
In whose name?
My name. But she's saying it's her car because we got married together, and what's mine is hers. How?
Is what is hers yours?
That's why I'm stuck. I want
David,
hers also.
How do they do separation? How do they split property?
So the property under the law is that the property law looks at the equality. So the property purchased at the beginning, during, and after the marriage should be shared equally. So we come from that point, equality, because you got it. We call it a matrimonial property. It was obtained during the marriage.
Yes.
And when you separate, it is said that you should share it 50-50. But then you need to prove your share. So the question will be, what was your contribution? And so the Matrimonial Property Act of 2013 is able to tell you the kind of proving that you need to make. One of them being, you need to prove the direct ownership of this property, or you can also prove the indirect ownership of the property. And the indirect, most of the time, or rather, let me start with the direct, would be if you spent money on that property. You went to the bank, took a loan, a mortgage, to buy that car or to buy that apartment. That will be a direct contribution, and the court is able to say that that property belongs to you at 100% because you contributed 100%, and you're able to prove with receipts and with the bank papers. The indirect way would be if, for example, Hobbs quits being a DJ and he decides to become a stay-at-home dad. And during that period of time, they have children, and he decides he's the one who is dropping them at school. He's the one, because now Hobbs is married to a pilot.
Yes.
And the pilot is
She's
in the
always
air,
flying. She's always doing
flying.
stuff.
And so in that situation, as he does the indirect, to prove his indirect, he's spending most of his time, instead of coming here at Pearl Radio to actually get a check at the end of the month, he has actually sacrificed his time, and he's actually there spending. And so that will be indirect contribution, and the court will be able to look at how much did you contribute, because you assisted your pilot wife to make sure that she was able to earn that money and to buy the apartment. And so you have a share of that apartment at maybe 30% or 20%.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So what about the case of Kivitu versus Kivitu, where there was a stay-at-home mom, Mrs. Kivitu, and at the time of divorce, she got the house. How do you prove that you contributed toward this house, and says, I was there for the children, I was there taking care of you so that you could go and prosper?
So you have to do it in reverse. So you're stay-at-home mom. So you have to prove that you have spent the time. So the evidence of showing that your husband is the one who is out most of the time, by even indicating what they do for a living, and that will be able to prove and to compel the court, the judge, that actually that man was not there, and you did most of the time, most of the work to actually contribute to this directly.
Tell us between the difference between civil law and criminal law. In case someone is tuning in, they're like, keep on hearing civil law, it's a criminal matter. What do the two mean?
The simple way of explaining it is that criminal law is basically any wrong against the state. So criminal. So if you have committed something against the government, or
Corruption.
For example, you've murdered someone and it's under the penal code. You've stolen something.
Kuku ya mtu nimeba pia.
Kuku ya mtu.
Yeah.
You have maybe rape. All these offenses become part of criminal law. And there's a standard of proof, which is basically you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt, which is you have to prove to the core that you actually did that crime.
Wow.
So the prosecution or the prosecutor has to come to court and say that you committed
That law.
that it was during the night, and there were lights, and they saw you, and there were 5 witnesses who saw you commit that crime. So that's what we call the criminal law, and that's a standard of proof. You have to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. And then for civil law, it's basically any crime against a fellow Kenyan, a fellow human being. So a tort, which is what we call if you cause an injury to somebody.
You gotta say that the tort is TORT. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, TOR.
Baraka. Yeah.
I'm just saying. When Kenyans hear it, they hear
Tort.
tort.
Tort iko kwa kotini pia.
Kuna tort law. Hiyo ndo nataka hiyo.
So TORT, which is an injury to a person.
Yes.
And if you commit an offense against a fellow person, becomes civil. So for example, I was buying land from Chipo here, and Chipo decided, you know what, he's not going to complete
the transaction.
So I will take him to the civil court and not to the, because it was a deal between the two of us. So there was no government involved, where there are rules on how we should be doing these things. It is basically how we have agreed to actually transact.
And can somebody be jailed for that?
You can only be jailed. We call it civil jail. So in civil, if you refuse to obey the law, then you are committed to civil jail for you to comply with the law. So Chipo has refused to pay up my money. Then what we can do is commit him to civil jail, rather than in the criminal case, whereby if you knock somebody or you steal something from somebody, then you'll be committed to jail.
If you're buying land in this country, people are being conned left, right, and center. Eliud, at what point do you involve a lawyer, and what really is the land buying process in this country? Say, I have identified 12 acres of land in Nanyuki. Nanyuki is very prime nowadays.
No, not 12.
Not 12.
Let's do 15.
Let's do 15.
Yeah.
Okay, big difference. I was like, Aki hopes. 12 is too small.
12 is too small.
15 is so much
Give it
better.
an exact number.
It's hypothetical. I don't actually have the land. Aki hopes.
You know, I told you 15.
No.
You don't know?
Why?
I'll tell you later then.
Are you correcting my hypothetical situation?
Let's do 15.
Okay. So we're buying. Hobbs, you're crazy. We're buying 15 acres of land. Are you okay with Nanyuki?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
it's
that's
okay.
fine. Good enough. Okay, 15 acres of land in Nanyuki, Iliud. How do you go about buying this land?
Well, first of all, you need to engage a lawyer when you're buying these 15 acres of land, because you need to conduct something we call a due diligence, which is to find out who are the owners of this land. Does this even exist qua ground, or is it just on paper? It just exists. Secondly, what's the historical background about this land? Was it part of Ndongo report? Because there's a Ndongo report whereby there were lists of properties that were actually not gotten the right way.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be buying property that will actually end up not belonging to you. Third, as you do your due diligence, you need to find out what's the future of this land. Is there a government plan to actually come and put up a road, a highway, an airport, etc.? So all that is important to consider, and that's why you need a professional to actually do it. You need to deal with surveyors, valuers, lawyers to actually help with that due diligence. And so once you have that, you need to then have a sit down with also do the due diligence on the seller. Are they the actual owners? So if it's a company, because Nanyuki has a number of land selling companies selling all these pieces of land, you need to find out who are the actual directors. Do they even their names appear on this title? Because it may just be a company on the title deed, but you need to find out what does this company do. Does it fulfill its mandate? Does it complete its sales? It's out here conning people and taking their money. So that's important. Then if it's an individual who is selling this land, what's the due diligence? You need to find out, are they the rightful owners? Are they is there a succession case which is pending? Because you find people buying land, and that land was it's in the name of their grandfather, who may not be around to actually execute or sign the documents to you. So you have to conduct that due diligence, then have a sit down, prepare a sale agreement, which is prepared by the seller's lawyer, who will prepare the sale agreement outlining the obligations of each party, the price, the land, the demarcation, the size, how you can actually get out of that transaction if you're not able to complete the payment process, how you're going to hand over the originals, the other kind of documents which will be handed over to you, which we call the completion document. So you find in agricultural lands, you need to actually get what we call land board consent. So that information is quite important when it's well captured, so that again a transaction doesn't fail to go through, and when you go to court for this civil case, you have no document to rely upon. The document you're relying upon is actually copy pasted and has mistakes. So that's why again a professional needs to actually prepare that sale agreement. And so once you have that, as the buyer, as a lawyer or as a buyer, then you need to prepare what we call a transfer, and you present the transfer. It is signed by the parties. The sellers will get you the consents and all these other documents that we need to hand over to you. If the land is under the municipal and they are supposed to be paying rates, they need to present to you the paid up receipts and what we call a rate certificate. So they give it to you so that you're now able to present all these documents and you're able to have the transfer done at the land registry. But there are different factors, because again, you may not be buying agricultural land. This land could be commercial. And so there is what we call change of user. Has it been properly done? This land may also be next to a river, wetland, maybe next to an airport or a power line. You need to get the way leaves approved, or you need to actually find out that this area has been approved for sale.
Exactly.
So the whole background, and that's why you need a professional.
What are some red flags? I've thought of buying land before in Nanyuki, and the guy who approached me with the land was selling me an acre and a bit. So an acre maybe like 1 and 1.8 and an eighth, but for like 250K. And then the money cash, and we're meeting on Kiambu Road at a Total petrol station. My guy,
everything about that sentence is so wrong.
I'm just like, and one of my boys went. It was like this, like from the word go. I'm like, this is completely wrong. But the guy was like, no. And then he had a whole map. And so you ask him, which one is my piece? He just was like, there. This doesn't point at a particular piece, but says it's there somewhere. Just trust the process. Eliud, what are some big red flags that someone would know that they're being swindled of money or something is amiss in this?
To quote one of the senators in this current government, Professor Tom Ojienda,
Yes.
he wrote a book.
SC.
Yes, he wrote a book and he says land is emotive. And because land is emotive, you need to be careful because it's not a single day transaction. You cannot just show up today and exchange money and the next thing you have documents.
You have land.
It's a process. And if anyone is not willing to go through the process and the journey, then you need to be very careful. You actually need not to take part in that transaction because you find yourself, of course, you've been given a title deed, but how sure are you this title deed actually has a roots on a ground somewhere, or is it's just a piece of paper? Because we have conmen, we have people, corrupt officers in land registries who might duplicate different title deeds, and so you need to be very careful when a deal is actually quite fast and it's too good. You need to also estimate the values. You can be buying land in certain areas at certain prices unless it's a very desperate sale or an auction.
So one thing also about land that I've noticed, first from where I come from, the western part of the country, family land, where there's this land gotten by your father, and there's a case about it, like you can't have land, you're not a son of this house. How do you go about it? Because there's sometimes like kwanza when the land is on the wheel and you're like, you will get this much, you will get this much, but somebody feels you don't deserve this land. Or maybe the other scenario is you've been given land, but your uncles have come and told you you don't deserve this land, so they're taking the land away from you. And how are they doing it? By force. They'll come, fence the land. After that, they plant things, and they tell you, yes, umeambiwa iland ni yako, but it is not yours. You don't deserve land.
And let's talk about matter succession. Same thing, what about when someone dies intestate, when they don't have a will, when they die without a will, and also when they die with a will and they die testate, and you have executors of this will as well. Sometimes they're court appointed. What happens to when someone has a will and someone doesn't have a will? And you're saying, even in the case of the will, there's some really strong vested parties who feel differently about how this will was drafted or come upon.
Well, will is basically an expression of how you'd like your property to be dealt with after your departure. And so a will has to be properly executed, drafted, and outline all the properties that the person owns. And so you'll find in some situations when we say someone has died testate, that person has died with a will, and they had already expressed who certain properties or assets will go to, and they need to have it properly done. You need to have proper witnesses. You need to have at least 2 witnesses who appear at the same time during the execution of that will, and when they appear there, they are going to witness your wishes.
Yep.
And also you need to keep the copies with let's say with a lawyer and those executors that you actually got. And so once we have it that properly done, then upon the demise or demise after you die, what will happen is that this will be read out, and the properties will have been allocated as per the wishes of the person who passed on, and you're going to take that will plus the other forms, petitions, succession petitions, file in court, and you're going to have what we call a confirmation of grant. And this confirmation of grant is going to dictate and say that as per the will, this property A, B, C goes to person Y, property Z, Y goes to person C. And so you're going to have it that way. And so any other person who tries to come and maybe your question, a relative, an uncle who might not want you to actually benefit from that, the only way they can challenge that is through the court system by raising issues about either the mental state of the person who made the will, saying that they were not in their right mind, or they were coerced to actually allocate this piece of land to you.
Okay.
And so it's important. Then there's the intestate, which is through where you don't leave a will. And so parties have to agree where and who takes what, and you file that in court. You have to get that estate gazetted and the personal administrators gazetted, and after 6 months, if no one is objecting to those personal administrators or the persons who are supposed to step into the shoes of the person who died, then the court is going to easily grant and say that, as per the wishes of the family members, how they chose to actually divide and allocate the different properties, we approve it. The court is going to approve that, and then you're going to take that document and do your transfers.
All right, we need to learn this plain Hobbs, eh? So before I ask him to leave, I just have one question for you. How does your faith come in with what you do? Are all lawyers liars?
Are what liars?
Are all lawyers liars?
No, actually, lawyers are not liars. It's because, by the way, have you read the Bible and seen some lawyers in some places where they quote about lawyers?
Give me an example.
I know there's a story in Acts, and I know there's another story in the Old Testament, whereby there are lawyers who are mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's something quite interesting. And as a lawyer, you are not a liar. What you're basically doing is you're trying to prove or to seek the truth, and if you cannot substantiate your claim, then it's up to you, and it's wrong if you're trying to sue somebody. So when I take you to court, Hobbs has been found allegedly, because no one should be an accused person is innocent until proven guilty. And so what we are doing in court is basically we are seeking that truth and saying, proof, tell us how did you see him step into this house and break in and take whatever we did. I'm just asking that in court, and I'm helping my client seek that truth and using the gaps in the law. So I'm not a liar. And so my faith comes in because we are applying what we've been called by God to do, to come and assist, to come and actually seek justice. There are several verses that provide that we should seek justice for those who cannot. And so my faith comes in because I'm helping these people to seek justice. It talks about the widows. It talks about orphans.
It's about the oppressed.
Yeah, the
Isaiah
oppressed.
58, yeah.
Isaiah 58. And so I'm coming in to step in, and that's how my faith comes in.
Eliud, thank you so much for hanging out with us this morning. Thank you for all the insights. Thank you for the information, for the education. And I hope to see you soon, man.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
And thanks for listening in.
We are Pearl Radio.